Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. Okay, so you've got your pen. You just set that aside. When we're doing composition, we just got to figure out where we want to put everything. And your whole piece of paper here has to be used. A good composition comes close to or touches 3 of the 4 sides. So for me, I look at his left leg, our right side, and it's almost even with the edge of the paper. So if I come over with my pencil and I just make a little mark there and say, okay, I want his shoulder to be right there, then that kind of gives me an idea of where everything's going to go. His head is going to be about right in here somewhere. And just block it in. Don't try to draw the head, just block it in. Say, okay, is it that big? Or is it smaller or bigger? Or, you know, how big is it going to be? There's the head. And if you look at our scrap, about halfway through the page, about right in there somewhere, his head's on that upper part there. So you put your circle right there. That might be too big. It might be too small. So then you look at the rest of his body, and it's kind of this big oval that's about right in here somewhere. And you just throw that in. That, you see where his ears kind of go? This is his hind legs. Maybe that's too big. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And then you've got this other leg that kind of comes down. It's not straight up and down. It kind of angles in just slightly. And there's a leg there. Here's a little bent foot that's kind of right there hanging out. His leg comes up, and if you look at the side of his head and he comes straight down like this, it's kind of with a curve. That's where his leg is. So now that I put this other leg in, I can see that this back was too big. And that's okay. This is what we call a point of reference. Everybody needs a point of reference. And if you just start doing details, there's no point of reference there. Okay, so now we have this point of reference. Now we can look at it and go, okay, was that head big enough? No, it needs to go a little bit bigger. So I'm just gonna make that a little bit bigger. Now, most of the time, and I don't know where we learn this, but most of the time we get rid of our mistakes before we fix them. The idea here is that you've got your point of reference, you've got it the way you first laid it down. When you fix it, if you erase it first, you lose your point of reference. And how do you know what to fix? So draw it right first and then erase it. So now I'm just looking at my scrap, looking at my picture, and where is our emphasis area? Where does your eye rest? Where does your eye first go? It wanders about and then it comes back. Where does it go? Does it go to the paw? Or to his little bobby tail? No, it goes to the head, specifically the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. That area is our is our emphasis area. And if you think of the rule of thirds, whoever took this picture was really probably a pretty good photographer. Because if you cut up your picture plane into thirds, then that area of emphasis goes over that section of your page. Whether it's here, there, or there, or there, that's your rule of thirds. So as a photographer, that's rule of thirds is really a very basic, important thing. His ears are just little triangles. So if I come up here, I think, okay, if his head is kind of level with his back there, and then there's this triangle for his ear. There's one there, and there's one over here. This one, because it's side view, it's a little narrower than this one over here. So that's about where the ear goes. I'm going to have to move it out because it wasn't quite right. And the eyes are just about in the middle of that circle. So if I look at this circle and I go right to the middle, those eyes are just about right there. If I come down, I can make a little circle there that may or may not be where the eye goes, but I'm just trying to guess. And then we adjust it. Is that about right, or do we need to adjust it? Proportioning is where you start lining things up, like where the eye is in reference to the ear. Like if you go on the end of this ear and then you come straight down, that's about where the eye is. It's over just a little bit. And if you go straight down from the corner of this eye, the outside edge of this eye, that's about where the nose is. So I can throw the nose in. Just as a little shape. I'm not trying to get it perfect. But I start lining things up, trying to even things out, get them where they're supposed to go. Make it right, and then erase what's wrong. Actually, you don't need to erase what's wrong, really. But I do just because it gets distracting. Look at the shape of his mouth. It's not quite even with the edge of his nose. It's inside just a little bit. So if you go inside just a little bit, then make that shape. It's kind of a rectangular shape with a little boat, maybe. A boat shape. So this is just composition and proportioning. That's all we're doing. And nothing here is set in stone. That's why I like doing this without the ink, because once you get the ink in there, then you're stuck. So as you're drawing now, you start comparing things. Compare the size of the head to the size of the body, you know. Mine is actually a little bit large, so I'm going to have to make it just a wee bit smaller. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. My head was a little big. I think that's better. So you can draw as much as you want to with your pencil, and just remember, everything you're drawing here gets erased. So don't get attached to that drawing. All this is a map, a guide of where you want your ink to go. Okay, here goes. I'm going to start with the dark ring around the eye. Notice the eye is not perfectly round. And so I'm just going to, instead of drawing a line around it, I'm going to do these little dots and dashes like this. Just zigzaggy through it. Okay? I don't want to do a line because that hard line doesn't look like fur. We want it to look like fur. And so just little dots and dashes throughout that whole thing. And then I'm going to break that. I'm going to go down underneath and do the same thing. Just little dots and dashes. If I need to change this, I can. If you draw a line around it, that line is there forever, and you just can't change it.
And you're doing it around the whole thing?
Yep. Now, where the pupil is quite round. So I'm just going to do this little circle, but it's like a little half moon because there's a little shine up in there. And then you just blend it in, but leave out that little shine. So it's like a little half moon, just like people eyes. Then there is some color in that eye. There is some value to it. And so I'm going to go back into it and just hatch through it. So I'm just going to start out and just hatch. And are you guys pressing hard?
No.
Good, don't. Very soft. Light, soft touch. In fact, I'm hardly even touching the paper. I mean, just enough to make a mark. If you need to add more, you definitely could. You can go back into it. You can do dots. You can do other little dashes. So I'm going to start from that eye, and I'm going to work into the other eye, down into the nose and the mouth. And as I do, I'm going to try to do the fur. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but fur in an animal starts with the center of the eyes, and this fur, I'll just draw a line. This fur is going to go out this way, so all this fur is going to go out this way, and this fur goes out this way. This fur kind of goes up to the top. And so as I make my lines, that's the direction that my lines are going to go. And if you look at the fur on the cat, that's kind of what they do. It's just kind of this starburst away from the middle of the head. So I'm going to pick out just the darkest areas and do those little feathered lines. So here's a little feathered line. I'm going to try to go in the direction that the fur flows. Now, if it's really dark, you can almost just scribble through it without any really direction. But just little lines. And you can see I'm kind of cross-hatching a little bit here and there. If it's darker, you just add more line. Here's that little dark edge across the nose. And they're just little dots and dashes. Don't press too hard or else you get a thicker line. And it's not good for your pen. Your pen likes to be pressed softly. I guess that makes your pen sensitive. Just light little edges. The closer your lines are together, the darker they'll be. And I'm just about ready for that other eye. Here's that little pupil, that half moon pupil. He has actually two shines on his eye. I'm only going to pick out one. That double shine is just too much. And sometimes I'm doing like little U's or little circles because I don't want my line to be hard. I want it to be soft. Here's his little jowl. And again, I don't want a line around that, so I'm just going to use these little dashes. Just say this is where his little jowl goes. Don't worry about his whiskers either. Those will come later. And just like we did with our sphere, I'm going to touch it up, smooth it out. Here's his tongue. Not drawing a line. It's just, I'm leaving it out, just like those letters, that negative drawing. Here's his chin. Remember, it's very soft, so you can't use a line. You've got to use little dots and dashes. So this little feathered line that I'm doing here, I know you're looking at it thinking, Mr. Lowe, how do you do that? That is a practice thing. You've got to be very soft with it. It will come. Anything that's dark, little dots and dashes that are close together. If it's a little lighter, less close together. And remember, you can always come back in and add more. So when in doubt, yeah, don't go too far with it. I think most of the time people just go too far. They add too much. And sometimes just a couple little dots is all you need. Up here in his nose where it's nice and thin and that hair is very thin, a couple of dots, that's all you need. At this point, the graphite becomes an annoyance to me. So I'm like, I gotta get rid of that graphite because it makes it look muddy, dirty. I want to get rid of that graphite as soon as I can. So I want to get rid of all that graphite. So what I've got to do now is I'm just going to go in and kind of block in where this stuff goes. So I'm just going to use little dots and dashes and do some blocking in. So I know this is kind of weird, but I just like getting rid of the graphite. It just, it does. It makes it look cleaner, and then I'm free to put in more line in places. As you get away from the face, your line can be a little bit longer, and therefore it gets a little bit faster. Notice how soft and light the ears are. Leave a lot of that out. In fact, if you start it down here at the bottom, then you pick up a little bit up at the top with those little dark hairs kind of coming off. Nobody needs that edge right there. And everybody goes, oh, I get it. I can see where that edge is. You can see the edge of the ear, but you don't need to draw it in. Just leave it. Besides that, you're going to be doing some stuff on the inside anyway, and that helps too. when you're doing fur, especially, don't have your lines always going in the same direction. Fur doesn't do that. It's a little spontaneous. So give it that latitude. Some lines flip up, some lines flip down, and you just kind of spontaneously. Once you learn to ink draw, it becomes very therapeutic. There is a form of therapeutic art called Zentangle. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
You could look it up if you want. It's using patterns to create textures, and I do a little bit of that in my Art 2 classes. But it can be very relaxing. I know right now it's hard to believe, but it really can. So just as much line as you think you need. And remember, don't go too far. You can always come back in and add more. I don't know if you've noticed this, but that chin down in there is not white. And so I just went in and just did some real quick line through it, and that just pushed it back into his head. Light things come forward, dark things go back. And so even this side looks like it's coming forward too much. I need to push it back into his head. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through very quickly with hatched lines. And that pushes it right back into his head. And the more you work on it, the better it gets. Even the top of his head is very light. You don't need much line there. A couple little edges and you got it. So once you're done with the head, then you can move to the body and just really simplify the body like crazy. So I'm going to zoom out so that you can see his body there and just simplify it. Keep it really, really simple. I mean, the head is the important part. You got that already. And some of that back, I mean, if you got rid of that, everybody knows where it's at. Just a couple little dots and dashes, and you got it. So here's his tail. It's just this little scribbly. But keep it open so that it's not. You don't want a hard edge there. It's nice and soft and fuzzy. To define the edges of his arms and legs, just do the spots and then leave out the edge, the side. If you look at it and think, I need something in there, do a few little dots and dashes, but you don't need much. Keep it soft. Now it's time to scribble. Everything really can be done now scribbling, and the last part is going to take just a little while. So I'm just going to scribble through it. Anything that's kind of dark, I first start out with a little cross hatching, little hatches. So once you start doing things around it, then you're like, oh, you know what? That face isn't as dark as I thought it should be. So then I'm going to go back into it and adjust it. So our little cat is floating. How do you make it so you look like grass down there? Yeah, just a couple little lines is all you need. Just enough to say, okay, there's a little grass there or something. I mean, it's not floating. Can't have floating bobcats. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left is all. Make sure your name's on it. A good place for a signature. Don't sign it right on the edge, because if it's a nice picture and you want to frame it, the frame will cover it up. So come up about an inch or so out of it and then give it a good signature. Hopefully you had a fun experience today and learned something maybe, and even tried something that you've never done before. And hopefully somewhere along the way it's made your life a little bit better, because art makes life better.